Hi everyone, welcome to our third exercise, creating a map in QGIS. In this exercise, we will learn how to change the visual styles of both vector and raster data. We will also learn how to add many of the important map elements Tanya talked about in Lecture 3. Our finished output for this exercise will be a published map with all the essential elements that make up a good map. For this exercise, we will again use our land cover from our previous exercises. So we want to bring that in, and our community forest shapefile. What we want to do today is change the visual styles of both the land cover and the community forest shapefiles. Let's start with the forest shapefile. Our first step is to right-click on the layer and go to Properties. The Properties window contains most of the information and functionality that the layer itself has. This includes things like the coordinate reference system for the layer, labels for the layer, fields of the attribute table, things like table joins, metadata for most of your underlying information, and the legend for the data, amongst others. And of course, the one we want to focus on today is the style. In other GIS software, this can also be called the Symbology tab. And so the first thing we want to focus on is at the very top here, the symbols, or how the symbols are displayed. Let's turn off our land cover layer first. So we just see our community forests. Go back to the style layer. And so right now we have single symbol selected. Everything is one color and one pattern. If we choose no symbol, everything will disappear, of course. Another option is categorized. And this one is made specifically for data that's in categorical form. And so you would choose a column to categorize it by. And so since we don't have any categories, we're going to use name as our category. And so after you have selected the column, you want to go over here and press classify. You can see then that all of the community forests in our layer popped up. And if we press apply, we can see them on the map. Now we could change the colors to a gradient, and we could even change the fill, which is the pattern inside the colors. Let's change that back to a simple fill. And let's change our color ramp to, let's say, shades of blue. And so this categorized style isn't particularly useful for our shapefile right now, but you can see how categorized style can be great for categorical data. Undercategorized is graduated, which is very similar, except instead of having a color for each individual class, the classes are grouped, and you can specify how many classes you want. And note that for the column selection, you can't choose a column with just text, like we did with names. So right now I'm choosing area. And so the graduated style is very relevant for what we want right now. If we want, let's say, 3 classes, and we want the smallest community forests in white, the medium ones in light blue, and the largest ones in dark blue. And so if you look on the map, that's exactly what we have. The largest ones in dark blue and the smallest ones in white. Over here, you can also change the way that you split up your classes. Right now we have it as set as equal intervals. There are some other algorithms that breaks up the classes. And lastly, on this tab, you also have layer rendering, which includes layer transparency. And so if I move that slider up and down, that just changes the transparency of the layers. Let's set that back to fully opaque and press OK. If you go down to our layers panel and press the little plus sign beside our community forest layer, you can see the legend of how the three classes were split up. Now let's add some labels to our forest layer. Let's go back to properties and go to the labels tab. Again, starting from the very top and working our ways down. Select show labels for this layer and select the column you want as your label. In our case, we want the names of our community forests. Click apply and voila. Now there are many options that help change the way the labels are displayed. You could change the text style, you could bold it, you could change the color, you could change the placement so that it doesn't block much of the shape like they are now. Let's choose a round centroid. This one looks pretty good. Okay, so now that we have our labels and style selected for our forest layer, let's look at the land cover layer. Turn that on first. Click this little plus sign to see how it's currently displayed. It looks like 0 to 11 is colors, and for some reason it's showing colors all the way to 255. And it does that because it's an 8-bit color, and so it just fills up all the potential possibilities, even when they're not necessary. But we could fix that, of course, going back into properties. Now, because QGIS isn't specifically built to handle raster data extremely well, we're going to have to do a bit of a workaround. And so in our style tab, currently we have the paletted style selected. And the paletted style is okay because it shows the 0 to 11 land cover classes, but it also shows, as we said, all the other 8-bit color options. And so to work around that, we want to go down to single band pseudo color. And so in our layers panel, we could see the legend of the colors. We could see that there are, from 0 to 11, there are various different colors. If we bring back our metadata file over here, we could also see that 0 to 11, we could also see that with the exception of 0 and 6, 1 to 11 are all land cover classes. So we know that there are 10 land cover classes in total. And so we want to use this to guide our style creation. And again, we're in single band pseudo color, and we want to add 10 classes or 10 entries for the legend. And we essentially just want to change everything manually so that it matches the land cover classes and names. So we know it goes from 1 to 5 and then 7 to 11. And we also want to attach the names of the cover classes to the labels, so we don't have to keep trying to match this with the metadata. And so I skipped ahead a little bit and did that. And now we want to change the colors. And we want to change them so that they make sense. The color scheme, the default color scheme right now for our land cover class layer is actually pretty good. So we're going to generally follow that color scheme. So double click on these colors. Forest greater than 80% would probably be some kind of dark green. And it just goes lighter and lighter. Another way to change the colors is not only guess where these colors are, but to actually change the RGB values, which are the red, green, and blue values. These range from 0 to 256 or 255. Again, because of the 8-bit coloring system. And again, I skipped ahead a little bit and changed all the colors. And you could basically choose any color you want for most of these classes, although sometimes there are customs or best practices in selecting the colors. For example, forest is usually green, settlements are usually red, water usually blue, etc. And click apply, and you will get something like this. It looks like the background behind the raster image is also green, and I think that's because we didn't add a value for 0, since 0 is the background no data value. And so let's do that. Add another class, set that as 0, label it as no data, and change that to white. Click apply it again, and voila. And looking at our map, it seems that our labels are still slightly hard to read. So let's play around with that. And that's one of the big things about GIS, that a lot of it is trial and error and just playing around with everything, clicking everything, so that you learn quicker that way. Let's make this size bigger. And make sure that they're away from all the shapes. And it's kind of hard playing with labels. Maybe change the color back to black so that it doesn't clash with our urban settlement land cover class. And set a minimum distance of 20 millimeters away from the polygon centroid. So I think that's a little bit better. And so there we have it. Let's actually make a few more changes. Right now I think that labels are slightly too big. Let's decrease that size, and let's change the color of our community forests, since right now they kind of look like lakes. And so we've used blue, we've used red. Let's use this shade of brown / orange, and that's a little bit more obvious. Let's add a outline to our shapes. You see I went back to simple and clicked on simple fill, and I'm just going to change this outline color to let's try white. See if that's okay. So I think that makes it a little bit more obvious for some of these. And so let's zoom into where community forests are, and let's move on to our last step, which is to create and publish a final map. To do that, we go to the project drop-down menu and go to New Print Composer. it prompts us to enter a composer title, which is the title of your map. Let's name it Liberia Land Cover and Community Forests. And so this is the QGIS map composer. The first thing we want to do is add a new map. So you want to look at all these buttons in the toolbar on the left hand side. So to add a map, all we do is drag the box for the base of the map onto the blank canvas. And so it's worth going through some of these tools and buttons, hover over them to see what you can do. For example, this move item content is a very important tool where you could pan around in your actual map while still in the composer. This select move item is where you will move your map, and after we get to it, the legend and other map elements. Could zoom in a little with the mouse wheel. You'll notice that everything's really blurry right now, and that's just because in the map composer view, you're gonna need to refresh your data every once in a while if you make any changes. And that refresh button is up here, so click that and everything will clear up again. If you go to your right hand side, the panels here are often really useful. The composition panel is basic info about the page and the export setting, etc. The item properties is also an important area. It's where you could change the scale of the map and the extent of the map. And so if right now, if we have a scale of this, if we change that to, what is that? If we change that to 1 million, press enter, it'll zoom in a little bit more. And so let's add a few other map elements. Let's actually zoom out a tiny bit more. Yeah. And so, okay, so let's shrink the size of the current map so we have space to add some other map elements. I'll fix the layout of this in a little bit. One of our most important map elements is the legend. So the legend button is right here. Again, just like the base of the map, drag it out. And you have everything pretty much automatic at first. If you want to make any changes, it's of course to your right. There's the item properties of the legend. You could, if you choose non-auto update, you could remove some of these features, or sorry, these symbols. If right now we're showing no data as white, but if you don't want to show no data, just delete that. If you want to change these numbers around, we could also do that. And so let's make this smaller and set this off to the side. I'll format everything after we have everything on the page. Our next map element is the scale bar. And again, this is a very important map element. Let's make that a little bit smaller. And we also want to add a title, so a text box here. Call it Liberia Land Cover and Community Forests. Change the font size to something much bigger. Center it, put it up here. And we also want to add a compass rose, which is under images. So draw a little box for images. Go under search directories under item properties, and you'll find a bunch of the images, and one of them can act as your compass rose. There are a few selections, few choices here. So now I just want to reorganize everything, play with the options a little bit. This legend seems very long, so I'm thinking of changing the number of columns. Maybe to 3, if that works. And putting the legend at the very bottom. Want the scale bar to be maybe slightly smaller. Right now it's at fixed width, this many units. Let's change that number something a little bit smaller. Our compass rose can sit right there. And let's see if we can move the map somewhere really relevant. And you may want to add some other information, such as your name, maybe the data source, etc. And so our map is ready to be exported. To do that, go to the Composer drop-down menu, and you have several different options to export. In our case, we're going to export it as a JPEG. Call it Liberia land cover and CFs. And press save. And so that brings us to the end of our last exercise. We hope that you have found these videos helpful. Thank you very much for watching.